The story opens by introducing a game that once captivated countless players, a romance action RPG praised for its carefully built world and tightly designed systems. Its mechanics were smooth, its setting rich with lore, and critics lauded it as a masterpiece that set a high bar for the genre. The tale unfolds in the kingdom of Solstia, within the prestigious royal academy where gifted youths train to become the realm's future pillars. Knights, mages, and nobles in training filled its halls, each bound to fate by talent and ambition. At the heart of the game's narrative stood a familiar promise, a classic struggle against a looming demon king, a battle meant to decide the world's salvation. Yet despite all its polish and acclaim, the game carried a flaw that many players could never ignore. The biggest complaint about the game became clear at the very end: the final boss was deeply disappointing. After the Demon King was defeated, the story suddenly revealed Duke Lucille von Central as the true mastermind, only for him to appear briefly and be defeated almost immediately. Later, a fan book explained that Lucille's backstory had been cut due to time constraints, stripping away his depth and importance. What should have been a powerful climax instead left players frustrated, feeling that the story's ending failed to live up to everything that came before it. Reincarnated into the world of Ultima Fantasia, the protagonist quickly realizes he possesses exceptional talent in this body. As the truth sinks in, confidence replaces surprise. With a quiet smile, he forms a plan, one that could change the fate of the world and fix the ending that once left him unsatisfied. The protagonist recalls his past life as an overworked corporate employee who died from exhaustion, only to be reborn inside Ultima Fantasia. Instead of becoming the hero or the final boss, he realizes he has reincarnated as Klaus Renford, a said-to-be mastermind and subordinate of Lucille who was destined to fade away without leaving a mark. Though frustrated at first, a sudden realization dawns on him, changing how he views his position in the story. Back in his new life, Klaus quietly sits in his study, lost in thought as his butler and tutor, Oliver, notices his distraction. When asked if something is wrong, Klaus brushes it off and asks to be left alone. As Oliver respectfully withdraws, Klaus reflects on his situation. He had believed he was reincarnated as a villain destined only to wait for his execution, but that assumption is beginning to feel wrong. Klaus reflects that he can vaguely remember the original Klaus's memories. Though Klaus wasn't especially talented in magic or swordsmanship, he possessed powerful abilities hidden within him. Realizing this, Klaus grows eager to test those powers for himself. When Klaus first tries wielding a sword, his movements are clumsy and awkward, far worse than he expected. However, as he continues practicing while recalling the form of a skilled swordsman, his body begins to adapt. With each swing, his technique sharpens, and clear improvement quickly becomes visible. Klaus then experiments with magic by combining his natural affinity with the techniques he remembers from the game. To his shock, he successfully casts a massive fireball on his very first attempt. When he tries other spells, the results are the same. Every spell is far more powerful than anything the original Klaus had ever managed. After testing his abilities, Klaus pauses in front of a mirror and notices another unexpected bonus: his appearance. The refined features and noble look suit him perfectly. With a faintly amused thought, he wonders if, had Klaus appeared more often in the game, he might have been far more popular than anyone realized. Realizing how powerful he can become by combining Klaus's hidden talent with his knowledge of the game, Klaus makes a firm decision. He will draw out that strength to its fullest and change his fate. This time, he refuses to live and die the same meaningless life he did before. With his resolve solidified, Klaus looks ahead to the story's inevitable end and makes a bold choice. If the only flaw of Ultima Fantasia was its weak final boss, then he will fix it himself. Rather than dying as a forgettable villain, he decides to surpass Lucille, become the true final boss, and create an ending worthy of the world, one that no one will ever call disappointing again. Klaus fully commits to his new path, raising his fist with fierce determination. He vows to walk the road of becoming the final boss step by step, embracing evil deeds and shaping himself into a charismatic villain. No matter what it takes, he swears he will stop at nothing until he reaches that ultimate goal. Klaus pauses to think about his first move and reflects on his circumstances. 6 months earlier, his parents were killed by a monster attack, leaving him to become the head of the Renford family at just 15. The family's reputation was already poor, the arrogant nobles who living in luxury while looking down on commoners. And Klaus himself had grown up selfish under corrupt aristocratic parents. Klaus admits he can't bring himself to sympathize with his past self. Even with a tragic backstory, Klaus's selfish personality makes him feel more like a disposable mob villain. Still, he realizes the Renford family's infamy could be useful to him. As he considers his next move, his thoughts are interrupted by a knock. Oliver arrives to inform him that it's time for his meal. Deciding to indulge for now, Klaus sets his scheming aside and heads to eat. Klaus is presented with an extravagant meal tailored to his noble tastes. Rather than eating it, he pauses to examine it, appreciating the indulgence before deciding what to do next. He inspects it with interest, clearly intrigued by the luxury, and learns that the dish is red dragon liver. The words sink in, red dragon liver. His expression shifts as soon as Klaus catches the word liver. He recoils in horror, admitting he hates liver and can't stand its strong odor. In his previous life as an overworked office worker who has forced himself to eat things he despised, suddenly a realization dawns, and his thoughts abruptly change direction. Klaus abruptly pushes the dish away and declares he'll pass. Using the moment to play his role, he straightens up and lets cold arrogance seep into his voice, scolding the servants for daring to present such a pitiful meal before him. The chef panics, insisting Klaus himself had asked for this meal, and he have worked hard to gather its rare ingredients. Klaus freezes for a moment, caught off guard, then brushes it off with feigned indifference. Internally, he realizes the confusion comes from having mixed memories, his own and the original Klaus's, making it hard to recall exactly what he said. Klaus coldly orders his butler to imprison the chef and everyone involved in acquiring the meal, insisting he never gave such an order. The command shocks everyone, but before it can be carried out, Oliver steps in, warning that such an action would brand Klaus as a tyrant. Faced with that reminder, the situation hangs in tense uncertainty. Oliver, clearly unsettled, tries to reason with him, insisting the chef meant no harm, but Klaus makes it clear that intent doesn't matter when his dignity is at stake. Klaus doubles down on his act, declaring that anyone who defies him deserves harsh punishment as a matter of course. He coldly insists his order be followed, framing it as authority rather than cruelty. Oliver reluctantly accepts the order and withdraws. As he walks away, Klaus feels a strange thrill rise in his chest. The satisfaction of exerting absolute authority is enough to make him forget his hunger entirely. With a faint, pleased smile, he reflects that his performance was flawless, undeniably villainous, just as he intended. As Klaus leaves, Oliver lingers behind, deeply troubled. He notes that Klaus has shown harsh behavior before, but this time feels far worse, far more unreasonable than anything he expected. Nearby, the chef collapses in despair, overwhelmed by the punishment after finally managing to secure such rare red dragon ingredients. As Klaus's outburst settles, a new doubt quietly surfaces. Red dragon liver is an ingredient whose value depends entirely on its freshness, yet there's been no news of a red dragon being slain anywhere nearby. The thought lingers as his gaze drifts back to the untouched dish. If no dragon was killed, then where did this liver really come from? Thinking back on Klaus's words, Oliver feels a chill. It suggests that someone might actually intend to harm his young lord. The thought unsettles him deeply. Unable to shake his concern, Oliver hesitates, then quietly apologizes and reaches for the untouched dish himself. As he inspects the red dragon liver more closely, doubt sharpens in his eyes. Surely, something about this isn't right. A week passes, and Klaus proudly counts the days, convinced his one evil deed-a-day plan is progressing smoothly. When Oliver requests an audience, Klaus allows it without hesitation. Oliver then gets straight to the point, bringing up the unresolved matter of the red dragon liver incident. Klaus recalls that he had them jailed for exactly 1 week. Klaus, wearing a smug smile, is already thinking ahead, planning to release the punished man so rumors of his cruelty will spread and boost his villain points. But Oliver calmly questions Klaus, asking if he truly understood everything that happened from the very beginning. Klaus freezes, wondering what he means. But Oliver interrupts, steering the conversation back to the truth. He clarifies that the liver was never red dragon liver at all. The ingredient served that day was something far cheaper and more disturbing in origin. It was a hungry bird liver. Oliver explains what truly happened. The liver Klaus saw that day was never red dragon liver, it was identified as hungry bird liver, a far cheaper ingredient. Someone had used illusion magic to disguise its appearance and pass it off as something rare. The chef had been deceived just as much as anyone else, unknowingly buying and serving a fake. Hearing this, Oliver expresses his amazement that Klaus sensed something was wrong instantly, even without knowing the trick behind it. Klaus explodes in disbelief. Internally, he knew nothing about any deception. Oliver calmly explains that the merchant who supplied the ingredients has already been arrested, and that the man himself confessed. He admitted he assumed Klaus wouldn't notice the difference between good and bad ingredients, which is why he dared to use illusions in the first place. Klaus then blurting out internally, "Then I need to give him the death penalty or something, right?" Oliver explains his reasoning plainly. Taking Klaus's words, "To those who defy me I'll be sure to show what exactly will happen to those who dare at face value." He interpreted them in his own way, confiscated the merchant's assets and sentenced him to work for the Renford family without pay for a time. To Klaus, that was a fitting punishment for someone who dared deceive him. Oliver, however, is quietly horrified. For a merchant, losing everything and being forced into unpaid labor is worse than death itself. Meanwhile, Klaus can only think, in stunned disbelief, why his butler keeps making such extreme decisions without consulting him first. And lastly, Oliver casually adds that he has something else to give Klaus. Klaus reads the letter in disbelief. The chefs he had imprisoned are thanking him, grateful that he only sentenced them to a week in jail, even though presenting a substandard dish to the family head would normally mean execution. Staring at the page, Klaus can't help but think, stunned, that the very people he punished are now expressing gratitude toward him. Rumors begin to spread throughout the manor and the town. Servants whisper in admiration, praising Klaus for instantly seeing through illusions and for showing mercy instead of executing the chefs. Outside the estate, word travels even faster. People talk about how the young head of the Renford family personally uncovered the fraud and dealt with the culprit. Support for Klaus quietly grows, both among the staff and the common folk. Watching this unfold, Oliver feels a deep sense of relief and pride, sincerely telling Klaus that he is grateful to be serving such a capable and respected master. After reporting the situation and delivering the message, Oliver quietly leaves the room. Klaus was so focused on acting like a ruthless final boss that he didn't realize what was actually happening around him. The butler made decisions on his own because he genuinely believed he was acting in Klaus's best interest, based on Klaus's words and behavior. The butler interpreted Klaus's vague, threatening statements seriously and carried them out responsibly, even more carefully than Klaus intended. Because of this, the punishments were fair and restrained, not cruel. The people involved felt grateful instead of resentful. Rumors spread that Klaus is smart, kind, and just, not evil. Klaus completely breaks down because he finally understands what went wrong. He wanted to become a charismatic villain, someone feared and respected. But instead, because of how he acted and how others interpreted his words, he ended up behaving like a kind, fair, and competent ruler. His punishments were reasonable, people felt protected rather than oppressed, and rumors spread praising him instead of fearing him. Klaus thought he was moving toward becoming a final boss, but in reality, he unknowingly stepped onto the path of becoming a good ruler instead. It's been 2 weeks since his reincarnation, and instead of becoming feared, his reputation has improved, which frustrates him. He realizes that the more he tries to act like a villain, the more people end up supporting him. To him, that feels like terrible luck. So he decides he needs to actively change course. Rather than relying on misunderstandings or secondhand actions, he plans to go out himself and inspect the Renford territory directly. His thinking is simple. If he wants to stop being seen as a benevolent ruler and move closer to becoming a true villain, he needs to take direct action and understand the situation firsthand. He disguises himself with a cloak and carries a sword, feeling that it finally gives him a proper fantasy villain look. As he walks through the town in Renford territory, he observes things calmly instead of acting right away. From what he sees, the town has all the basic necessities, so people aren't struggling to survive. It's quieter and less flashy than the royal capital, with no entertainment districts. Thanks to 2 weeks of paperwork and reports, Klaus already understands the territory on paper. He's also been doing sword and magic training, so he's more confident going out alone. As he walks through the town, he notices that the streets are quiet and orderly. People aren't panicking or suffering. The town isn't very lively, but it's stable. To Klaus, this feels like good news, not because things are good, but because he assumes the quietness means people are resentful, tense, or oppressed under his rule. He thinks this lack of liveliness proves his domain is already leaning toward the Dark Lord atmosphere he wants. He tells himself, "This must be the current state of my domain. If even the capital is like this, other regions must be worse. Surely there are people who hate me." At first, Klaus is telling himself that a charismatic villain should be hated. He assumes Oliver, his butler, must have exaggerated when he said Klaus's popularity had skyrocketed. Klaus convinces himself that the lack of obvious hostility means he just hasn't seen it yet. Suddenly Klaus encountering a real problem in the streets. A small boy stealing, and immediately after, the merchant grabs the child and starts roughly take his things back. The boy, however, desperately begs for forgiveness and explains that he stole only because his younger sisters have nothing to eat. He isn't stealing for greed, he's stealing to survive. The merchant is angry and cruel, calling the fruit something only the Lord could enjoy and insulting the boy for even touching it. To him, the child is just a thief who deserves punishment. He doesn't care about the reason. Around them, bystanders notice what's happening. Some feel uncomfortable and tell the merchant to go easier on the child. Others mention that kids like him from the slums have been appearing more often. People quietly question why the guards aren't doing anything. People are divided, some hate thieves, others feel sympathy for the starving child. Most of them aren't truly angry at the boy, but are venting their frustration at someone weaker because life is hard. Klaus watches the situation calmly. Then Klaus steps in. The crowd is shocked to see their lord personally present. His appearance alone changes the mood. The people watching start to wonder what Klaus is planning, and some even think he might personally help the child.
Klaus steps in and silently confronts the rich merchant who was abusing the starving boy.
He doesn't shout or threaten, his calm presence alone makes the merchant panic and back off. Klaus suddenly raises his hand. The boy, realizing that the person standing before him is the Lord himself, reaches out weakly and calls to him. When the child reaches out to him, expecting kindness, Klaus immediately shuts him down. He tells the boy that someone like him is unnecessary in his domain. Then he uses his power. The child is confused. He genuinely thought Klaus would help him.
Klaus fully commits to acting like a villain.
He casts a spell called Wind Prison, trapping the boy inside a swirling cage of air and lifting him off the ground.
The child panics and screams, completely terrified.
People around them are shocked and horrified. Some shout that it's going too far to use magic on a kid.
From the crowd's perspective, this looks like a genuine cruelty. Klaus finally explains his thinking.
He reminds himself that he doesn't want to be a saint or a hero, his goal is to become a charismatic villain. From his perspective, protecting a poor child would only improve his image, which is the opposite of what he wants. So he deliberately shifts his protection to the merchant instead. He reasons that the merchant is the one who provides him with luxury goods like high-class fruit, making him more useful in a cold, villain-like sense. By siding with the rich merchant and ignoring the starving child, Klaus believes he can lower his reputation and appear selfish and cruel. Klaus decides to act publicly and decisively so he doesn't miss his chance to look like a villain.
He steps forward in front of the crowd and asks, "Does anyone have any complaints?" Instead of quietly handling things, he wants people to feel intimidated and think, "This lord is dangerous." This is him deliberately asserting authority and pressure.
Klaus publicly declares that he will not tolerate this kind of behavior in his domain, speaking in a cold, authoritative way so everyone hears it. On the surface, it sounds like a strict ruler laying down the law. In his own head, though, he's thrilled. He thinks he did everything perfectly. He harshly punished a child and made it a public spectacle. Then he used that punishment to threaten the rest of his subjects. To Klaus, this feels like textbook villain behavior, so he believes he just gained a huge amount of evil charisma points. The guards arrive late and are clearly confused about what's going on.
Klaus notices them and internally thinks their timing is convenient.
He then explains that he has already captured the criminal using his wind magic, trapping them in a temporary wind prison that will naturally disperse in about 5 minutes. After saying that, he delegates everything else to the guards and walks away. When the guards question the situation, Klaus brushes them off calmly and confidently, telling them to ask the crowd later if they don't understand. After everything is over, Klaus thinks the child will be completely exhausted from being violently tossed around by the wind spell. But he reassures himself that it's fine because his wind prison isn't a lethal spell, and killing a child would obviously be unacceptable.
In Klaus's mind, the child suffering publicly will damage his reputation even more. That means his plan to become a feared, disliked ruler is working perfectly. So he walks away laughing to himself, genuinely excited about what tomorrow will bring. The guards and townspeople arrive after Klaus has already left. They don't know the full context, so they rely on rumors and what they see.
Someone explains that a child thief was punished by the Lord using magic.
Seeing the aftermath and hearing only fragments, they conclude the punishment was far too severe for the crime.
One guard recalls hearing rumors that Klaus had recently become generous, but now decides, I guess those rumors were lies. Then another guard notices the wind spell stopping.
Once the wind spell fades, people rush over and shout, "Are you okay?" But they saw something unexpected.
They are expecting the child but a grown man emerge. Everyone was confused. One guard suddenly realizes something and thinks, wait,
this guy, could he be?
Then start to recognize the person caught in the spell.
Then the shocked realization hits.
This man is a key member of the criminal organization Crimson, known as Gallo of the White Shadow. The guard recalls important information. I thought he'd vanished several months ago.
And why is he here? The guard calmly remembers what Lord already did.
He tells us that the criminal is sealed inside the wind prison and orders us to take care of the rest once the spell fades. And recently Lord also saw through the disguise fake rare item, the red dragon liver. And now, this wasn't random cruelty or overreaction, it was a deliberate capture of a dangerous criminal. A few days after the incident, Klaus is calmly thinking about what happened. He hears that a criminal organization, Crimson, was wiped out.
The townspeople and servants feel relieved, happy that crime has dropped and daily life is now safer.
He casually thinks that an organization like that could have been useful under his control, since he wants to become a charismatic villain, not a benevolent ruler. Speaking of crime, he's thinking back to the incident from the other day. He wonders what the final outcome was after that mess.
The people Klaus helped are now openly thanking him.
The former victims, including the children and townsfolk, are smiling, relieved, and genuinely grateful.
From their point of view, crime is gone, they're safe again, and their lord protected them. Klaus, however, is caught completely off guard. He didn't expect gratitude. He thought his actions would make people fear or dislike him. A guard reports back proudly, Crimson has been completely destroyed. He praises Klaus's instructions from the other day, treating them as a brilliant strategy. Klaus reacts with confusion. His expression and inner thought, "What are they talking about?" show that he didn't realize his actions would lead to something this big. The guard then explains the key detail. The boy Klaus captured was actually a high-ranking executive of Crimson, whose appearance had been altered using an illusion magic tool. Klaus suddenly feels déjà vu, realizing this situation is similar to past misunderstandings where people assumed he planned everything. The guards explain what actually happened behind the scenes. The criminal group was testing an illusion magic tool. They disguised themselves as children to gain sympathy. They split up and committed thefts, causing the recent crime wave. But, capturing the disguised boy exposed the scheme. From that executive, the guards learned who sold the illusion tool, and where the rest of the group was hiding. Because of this they stopped the thefts, and prevented a much larger criminal plan in advance. A girl explains that she was actually present at the scene, when Lord told those words, which were directed at an executive of the criminal group Crimson. The girl is quoting what Klaus said earlier, repeating his harsh, ruler-like words, "A being like you is unnecessary in my domain and I will never allow this kind of conduct." Because of that, she became deeply inspired, seeing Klaus as a noble, righteous lord who protects the people. But Klaus himself being confused, thinking, who is that? The crowd suddenly rushes toward Klaus, all shouting "My lord," at once. People are pushing in close, clearly excited and emotional after everything they've heard about what he did. Klaus, meanwhile, is completely overwhelmed. He panics internally, cursing under his breath, because this is the exact opposite of what he wanted. Instead of being feared as a villain, he's being idolized and swarmed by grateful citizens. The townspeople are still excited and cheering for Klaus, closing in on him with gratitude. Klaus completely panics. Inside his head, he screams in frustration, wondering why everything keeps turning out like this when he wanted the opposite. Few days later, Klaus sighs and complains, wondering why he has to do everything himself, even though he's supposed to be working toward becoming a charismatic villain. Klaus is being told that the room ahead can only be opened by someone with the blood of the Renford family. That's why he has to personally go retrieve the items. The butler also reminds him that the work has piled up. Because recently, Klaus was overwhelmed by how much support and praise he suddenly received, so he ended up sick in bed for 3 days, and now all the work from those days has accumulated. While Klaus was sick in bed, Oliver handled all of Klaus's duties in his place, keeping the domain running. Klaus also notes that, after the real Klaus's parents died, and he reincarnated here, it was Oliver who continued to manage things smoothly. Klaus admits to himself that he can't oppose Oliver right now, because he's far too competent and indispensable. But, he dramatically declares in his mind that, one day he'll show Oliver how overwhelmingly evil he is. Suddenly a scream was heard, and it catches Klaus's attention. Then Klaus goes to that direction, wondering if something happened. A maid holding her cleaning tool tightly. She looks alarmed. When the maid finally notices Klaus behind her, she freezes in shock and blurts out, "My lord?" The maid bows deeply, shaking, and apologizes loudly. I am so sorry." She's clearly panicking because she thinks she's caused trouble in front of her lord. Klaus glances at her reaction, slightly puzzled, noticing how frightened she looks. Klaus notices the overturned bucket and spilled water. He calmly assumes the situation is simple and thinks, did she spill some water while cleaning? From his perspective, it's a minor accident. He thinks her fear is because she believes he's about to punish her, not because of the spill itself. Internally, he celebrates, believing this fear raises his villain approval rating. Klaus notices that the maid is cowering far more than necessary for just spilling water. Her fear feels excessive. That triggers a realization for him, that reminds me. And he starts thinking about why she might be so frightened. He focuses on one detail, the maid has black hair. In the Solstia kingdom, there's a long-standing superstition that people with black hair have demon blood. Because of that belief, black-haired people are often targets of discrimination, even though everyone knows the rumor isn't true. Klaus understands that this prejudice is likely the real reason she's so terrified, not because she spilled water, and not because he's about to punish her, but because she's used to being treated harshly. Klaus is reminded of a heroine from the game story he knows. She also had black hair and suffered discrimination because of it. Her struggle against prejudice moved him deeply. While he's thinking about that, the maid looks up at him, confused and unsure why he suddenly went quiet. In his head, Klaus abruptly raises his hand, declaring in exaggerated fashion that as a charismatic villain, he should punish her. But he immediately cuts himself off,
admitting that this has nothing to do with him and that he doesn't actually have time for such theatrics. Instead of punishing her, he calmly tells the maid to go back to work, prioritizing his official duties. The maid is left stunned, responding with a small ha, clearly not expecting that outcome. The maid finally responds, still shaken, stammering, "Why yes, my lord." She's clearly relieved. Oliver, the butler, calls him back to reality and urges him to move on, and Klaus agrees. Klaus watches her go and starts thinking to himself. He finds it strange that he doesn't remember ever seeing her before, especially since her black hair is so noticeable. Oliver, the butler, explains her background. The maid's name is Marie. She is a fully trained maid who has served the Renford family since the previous lord's time. Klaus is still bothered and asks Oliver why he has never seen that maid before. He replies, however, she is usually assigned very little work. Most of her duties are limited to minor cleaning and miscellaneous chores. Because of that, she rarely enters the central areas of the manor, where Klaus usually is. Oliver concludes that this is why Klaus never had a chance to meet her before. When Klaus hears that Marie is given very little work, the words hit him harder than expected. For a moment, he misunderstands and wonders if that means she's a slacker. Oliver immediately corrects him, saying that's not what he meant at all. This situation reminds him of someone from his past life, a hateful coworker. That coworker would dump his own work on Klaus, act friendly in front of the boss, and still get praised and promoted, while Klaus carried the burden. Remembering that unfairness leaves Klaus irritated and uneasy, Klaus is still caught up in his thoughts. He considers that if Marie were like the coworker from his past life, someone who caused trouble for others, then he would need to punish her properly. Oliver, meanwhile, is explaining more details, but Klaus isn't really listening at that moment. Oliver mentions that Marie usually lives by herself in the annex, separate from the other servants. That line finally catches Klaus's attention. He snaps out of his thoughts and realizes what Oliver just said. Immediately, Klaus gives a sudden order. He tells Oliver to bring him the floor plans of the manor. Oliver, slightly confused but obedient as always, answers, "As you wish." Klaus confirms that Marie is the only servant living in the detached building. He finds that strange, because his parents were strict and would never tolerate a lazy servant, let alone let one live alone. From this, Klaus jumps to the wrong conclusion. He assumes Marie must have been given special treatment by his parents. In his imagination, he mistakenly concludes she was spoiled by his parents, when in reality, the truth is very different. Klaus firmly rejects the idea of special treatment or living alone being seen as kindness. He reasons that if Marie's previous masters looked good for treating her well, then doing the same would hurt his image as a charismatic villain. To him, that would look like a smear against his villain persona, so he immediately shuts the idea down. Because of that logic, he decides Marie should not receive special consideration. He orders Oliver to inform Marie and tells him to have her take only the bare essentials from the annex and wait outside. Oliver answers Klaus's order politely with "As you wish." Klaus, meanwhile, is confused by his own reaction and thinks to himself that he got worked up way too suddenly. Despite saying he doesn't care anymore, Klaus decides he'll go to the annex himself anyway. Klaus arrives at the detached building and is immediately shocked by how it looks. Ironically, Klaus even thinks it's still more luxurious than the cramped office life he had in his past world. Klaus, still stuck in his earlier misunderstanding, thinks she must have been a favorite to be given a place like this. Marie arrives carrying her small bag and nervously says she brought only her essentials, just as ordered. Marie looks confused and asks what he's planning to do. Klaus answers bluntly, saying it should be obvious. Klaus tells the others to watch closely, signaling that he's about to do something important. With a dramatic gesture, he declares, "This is my answer." Klaus raises his hand and unleashes a powerful spell, Storm of Destruction. A massive spiraling shockwave erupts from his hand, tearing through the area in front of him. Marie is completely shocked by what just happened. She can't believe Klaus destroyed the annex. She asks why he would suddenly do something like that. Klaus calmly says it's exactly as it looks and explains his decision. The scene shows the annex reduced to rubble. Klaus states plainly, "Now you won't be living in this annex anymore." Marie thinks she's lost whatever protection or favor she had and fears punishment. Marie lowers her head, clearly confused and uneasy after the annex is destroyed. Klaus observes that she seems shocked because her special treatment is gone. Marie nervously asks what will happen to her now. Klaus calmly tells Marie that she will now share a room with the other maids, instead of living alone. Marie listens quietly, looking unsure but obedient. Klaus then adds that she will participate in all mansion work, not just light chores. He firmly states in his mind that he won't tolerate any slacking. Marie hesitates and softly says, "You mean," clearly trying to understand the situation. Klaus turns away and says he said everything he needed to, leaving the rest to Oliver. Klaus notices her reaction and thinks that rumors of him being a cruel noble will surely spread because of this. He doesn't regret it, in fact, he's satisfied, laughing to himself because this outcome fits his image as a charismatic villain. Marie was left alone, holding her luggage while surrounded by the rubble of the destroyed annex. During Marie's childhood, she and her mother lived together, enduring discrimination because they both had black hair. The royal family tried to eliminate prejudice against people with black hair by ordering nobles to actively hire them. When Marie was 12 years old, Viscount Renford hired her mother to gain favor with the royal family. As a result, both mother and daughter were brought to the Renford estate and made to live in the rundown annex, separate from the main manor. Marie's mother was born weak and later died during an epidemic, after being overworked more than the other servants. After her mother's death, Marie was kept on as a replacement, because the family didn't want to lose another servant with black hair. However, they didn't truly know what to do with her, so she was given only a few mostly meaningless tasks. Marie herself didn't understand why she was there and lacked the courage to leave. Over time, the annex became a kind of curse, binding her emotionally. Marie remembers her mother's last request, to someday leave the annex and see the wider world. Young Marie clings to her mother, saying she's lonely and feels bound to this place, wanting to go with her. Her mother gently refuses, apologizing that she can't take Marie along, but reassures her that things will be okay. She ends with a hopeful promise that someday, Marie will be able to leave. Marie grew up believing no one would come for her. The promise of salvation existed, but reality constantly proved otherwise. Despite that promise, she says she couldn't believe those words. Even after the new lord, Klaus, took over the manor, he never noticed her existence at all. Marie apologizes in panic when Klaus appears. She's shocked and asks herself why he's here, because a lord normally wouldn't come to a place like this. Marie then explains why she dared to hope. She had heard rumors that the new lord is kind and compassionate, so she thought maybe, just maybe, he would be different. Marie explains the rumors she heard about Klaus. People said he destroyed a crime syndicate, captured an evil merchant, and even showed mercy to a subordinate who made a mistake. These stories made him sound powerful but kind. Marie looks at Klaus quietly, her expression serious and hopeful. In her heart, she asks him directly, "My lord, will you be the one to save me?" Klaus firmly declares his decision. He says Marie will no longer live alone, will share a room with the other maids, and will take part in the mansion's work like everyone else. Then he emphasizes it strongly. Watch closely. This is my answer. Marie closes her eyes and clasps her hands, thinking of her mother. In her heart, she realizes that what Klaus is doing now fulfills the promise her mother once made, that someday, she would be freed from the annex and live a proper life. Oliver gently responds that he's glad she was finally able to leave the annex, showing sincere relief for her situation. Marie wipes away tears and thanks Oliver. She tells him he has always been kind to her, her voice calm but emotional. Now understanding the outcome, Marie smiles with gratitude. She realizes she can finally live like everyone else, no longer isolated, and sincerely thanks them for it. Marie recalls how, just a short while ago, Oliver had told her Klaus's order to bring only the bare essentials and wait. At the time, she didn't know what it would lead to. He explains that Klaus told him to make sure Marie didn't forget the mementos left by her mother. Oliver then gently tells Marie that she shouldn't be thanking him. He's calm and humble, making it clear he was only following instructions. Marie quietly takes in as Oliver reminds her, from now on, Klaus is her master. Marie smiles warmly and bows slightly, sincerely thanking Klaus. In her heart, she accepts him completely as her master. She believes Klaus is both a great lord, and the best master she could ever serve. She feels grateful and devoted, after everything he has done for her. Klaus suddenly feels a strange chill run through him. He looks confused and uneasy, wondering if he's still not fully recovered or if something is wrong with him physically. His expression steadies, and he reassures himself that, overall, things turned out well this time. Immediately after, his usual mindset returns. He starts thinking strategically again, asking himself what kind of incident he should cause next to lower his likability, since his goal is still to act like a proper villain. The scene then shifts to an adventurer staring at the monster in shock, clearly caught off guard. His expression shows disbelief and tension. A monstrous figure is shown up close. It explains that what happened to it is a mutation, emphasizing how abnormal and horrifying it looks. His companion reacts in panic, reinforcing how dangerous and unexpected their situation is. He reacts in shock, realizing this shouldn't be an ordinary dungeon. He questions whether the monster is the result of a mutation. A huge horned ogre appears. Its size and appearance are abnormal, hinting that it's far stronger than a normal dungeon boss. The narration explains that the dungeon boss ogre has evolved into a high ogre, making the situation far more dangerous for them. He tries to retreat, but then thinks of his injured companions. He notes that this monster is faster and stronger than usual, and his allies have collapsed and can't even run. Gwen yells to his companions to run, showing urgency as the situation worsens. He activates a communication spell, planning to call the guild for emergency. A party member realizes that even if help exists, it will take time to arrive, and doubts if there's anyone strong enough to fight a high ogre.
Gwen shouts in desperation. Even knowing the danger, he decides to keep going instead of running away. Gwen resolves himself.
His teammates are injured, and he refuses to abandon them. He decides to hold the monster back as long as he can, and begs the guild to hurry and save them. Gwen desperately sends his message, begging it to safely reach the guild before it's too late. He draws his sword and steadies himself, telling himself he just needs to hold on until help arrives. He charges straight at the high ogre. Despite the huge difference in strength, he resolves to stop it with everything he has, buying time no matter the cost.
Klaus sits alone at his desk, thinking calmly.
The narration says that after destroying the servants' annex, he starts planning his next move. A close-up of documents as he picks them up, showing he's seriously reviewing information and preparing carefully.
Then Klaus reflects that if he wants to be the final boss, then greater power will be necessary. His expression is composed, showing calculation.
It shows his daily training, sword practice and spell casting.
Klaus reflects on his routine since reincarnating.
He trains with the sword and practices magic every day, but recently he's felt his growth stagnating, as if he's hit a limit. He remembers explanation of the main playable character. Increasing level allows skills to grow further and become stronger.
He analyzes the system logically.
His skill levels have capped, and to break past that limit, he needs to raise his character level instead.
Klaus then reaches a conclusion. The most common way to level up is going to a dungeon and hunting monsters. He suddenly leaves, surprising the people back at the mansion.
Close-up of his feet as he heads out, emphasizing that he's already on the move and not hesitating.
Klaus walks toward the dungeon calmly.
He notes that he has already studied this dungeon before, and with his current strength, he believes he can clear it without trouble. He pauses and looks around, sensing that something flew toward him. He suddenly feels something off, like movement or danger is nearby. He reflexively swings his weapon to block it. Klaus realizes it happened by accident. He didn't mean to strike or attack whatever it was. Klaus notices a strange small creature on the ground and wonders what this blue bird is. He kneels down and hears broken words coming from it, mentioning a dungeon and companions. The creature weakly asks him to help their comrades, making the situation sound urgent. Klaus realizes this creature is a communication magic, likely sent to call for help and guide rescuers to its master. Klaus examines the small bird and realizes the communication spell didn't reach its intended recipient, likely because it was disturbed earlier. He decides not to ignore it. Even though it's inconvenient, he feels it would be wrong to abandon the message just because it failed. Klaus resolves to show respect to the bird and tells it to stay here for now, implying he'll handle the situation himself.
The scene then shifts to the dungeon entrance, showing that Klaus has chosen to go inside personally to deal with whatever is happening.
He finishes preparing and tells himself he's ready before entering the dungeon.
Klaus checks his equipment.
He reviews a reaction-boosting ring that increases attack power while HP is low, and a blood-attracting lures made from monster blood that can attract nearby monsters. Klaus explains the most efficient leveling method in this world, fighting monsters stronger than yourself, preferably alone, and especially when your HP is low, because that gives higher bonus EXP. He briefly jokes about how strange this system would be if it were a romance game. Klaus calmly concludes that experienced players intentionally lower their HP, while using the reaction-boosting ring to maximize efficiency.
Klaus notes that this equipment originally came from suspicious dealers, reinforcing that it's risky but effective.
He used the blood-attracting lure on himself, reminding himself that using it increases danger, but he's confident because he understands the game mechanics. With all preparations complete, Klaus declares that he's ready. It's time to move out and begin the dungeon run. Monsters inside the dungeon react immediately. The smell of blood draws them in, proving the lure works as intended. Close-up of Klaus's calm, focused face as he follows through with the attack, showing he's completely in control. Klaus swings his sword in a smooth arc, cutting down a monster that lunges at him from behind. He immediately prepares another move, releasing a spell from his hand.
Another monster is blasted away head-on, struck cleanly by his attack and clearly overwhelmed. Klaus stands among the defeated monsters, calmly checking his hand and the lingering feeling after the fight. He reflects that this is what leveling up feels like, recognizing the sensation from experience. Klaus smiles with quiet satisfaction, confident that he can keep fighting longer now thanks to the level increase. He clenches his fist slightly, realizing his stamina and resilience have clearly improved. He decides the timing is perfect. He'll defeat the boss and head back. Klaus pauses and looks ahead, thinking the boss room should be just in front. He hears voices coming from the boss room and realizes someone else got there first. Klaus sighs slightly, acknowledging the situation, but prepares to act anyway. He hardens his expression and decides,
without hesitation, that he will take the boss and the experience points for himself. He steps closer, thinking the boss should match what he remembers from the game. Klaus pauses, sensing something off, and realizes the dungeon boss should be an ogre. Klaus sees the scene clearly: an enormous ogre fighting adventurers, with some already knocked down. He notes that the ogre looks bigger than expected and compares it to the game version. Close-up of the ogre's face as Klaus concludes, the real world differs slightly from the game version, I guess. Klaus steals his resolve, deciding that leveling up matters more than anything else right now. Klaus thrusts his hand forward, activating his skill and focusing his magic. Inferno burst. A massive wave of fire erupts from Klaus, blasting forward with overwhelming force toward the enemy. Close-up of the ogre's face as it's hit head-on. The blast from Klaus's spell slams into the ogre at close range, engulfing its upper body. The explosion fully erupts, tearing through the boss room with overwhelming force. He declares the fight over, calmly stating that the conquest is complete. Klaus relaxes and smiles confidently, clearly satisfied with the result. He reflects that after leveling up, his power output clearly increased compared to before. Klaus senses something strange and reacts in surprise, wondering who it is. Suddenly the surviving adventurers look toward Klaus in shock, wondering who the person is that defeated the dungeon boss so easily. An injured adventurer panics when realize who Klaus is. Klaus looks down calmly, while others call him Lord. One of the adventurers panics and calls out, trying to stop him as Klaus starts walking away from the boss room. Klaus thinks to himself that he deliberately revealed himself to the adventurers. The injured adventurers watch him from behind, while Klaus, misunderstanding his actions and thinking of himself as a ruthless person who steals others' hard-earned achievements, and thinks it will definitely lower his reputation. Klaus laughs to himself, realizing his only goal was to level up. But the result turned out far bigger than expected. The adventurers explained that they were suddenly attacked by a strange monster, lost their strength, and even their communication magic stopped working. Continuing to describe how the monster appeared out of nowhere, then one of them urgently addresses Klaus as their savior. They add that the man, Klaus, never asked for a reward and didn't even reveal his identity, which makes the whole thing more unbelievable. The adventurer explains that the mysterious man, Klaus, received their communication magic while injured and bleeding, then immediately came to save them. Thanks to him, they managed to return safely to the guild. The healer explains that at the time, the man's HP was extremely low, only about 10%. In that condition, he could have died at any moment. The protagonist quietly notes that this was due to the reaction-boosting ring, keeping the detail to himself. The adventurers express guilt and frustration, saying that people as weak and helpless as them shouldn't have caused someone so important to take such a reckless risk. The injured adventurer smiles sadly and says that recently there have been rumors that the Lord has changed. He admits he didn't believe the rumors at first, but now he understands why people started talking. The adventurer then raises a mug and praises Lord Klaus, calling him the ruler of the region they live in and saying he's far more amazing than any noble. People in the guild echo the praise, clearly moved and impressed by Klaus's actions. The story spreads among many adventurers, and the guild fills with repeated cries of Lord Klaus, showing how deeply everyone was touched by what he did. That day, a celebration in honor of Klaus continued at the Adventurers Guild until morning. Klaus suddenly sneezes loudly, like he felt someone talking about him. He walks down the corridor and calmly thinks that someone must be saying bad things about him again. He immediately laughs it off, smiling widely, and says that actually it feels nice and amusing, and it's exactly what he wants. Time passes, a few days later, showing things moving forward. Klaus reflects that over the past few days he's cleared several dungeons and raised his level quite a lot, and thinks he's reached the level cap, so for now he plans to focus on administrative work instead of dungeon runs. Suddenly, someone asks to speak with Klaus for a moment. Klaus looks slightly wary and asks if it's something private. The butler answers calmly and explains they want to appoint a personal attendant for Klaus. Then the butler calls someone to come inside to discuss it properly. Marie looks a little nervous but sincere as she introduces herself and bows politely in a maid uniform, formally stating that she will do her best to meet Klaus's expectations. She promises to serve him with her whole heart, and says that from now on, no matter the task, he can leave everything to her and asks him to give her orders. Klaus senses something is off and thinks that Marie might still be holding a grudge against him. He recalls that she was the servant left behind in the pavilion that was destroyed because of his attack, and realizes his suspicion might be correct. Marie smiles gently with her eyes closed. Klaus wonders if she asked Olivier to arrange this position as his attendant in order to take revenge on him. Klaus looks serious and uneasy, questioning what Marie is truly planning toward him. He then pulls himself together, deciding not to overthink it for now. Klaus looks troubled and thinks about what he should do now. He thinks about Marie becoming his personal attendant, which happened on Olivier's recommendation,
and recalls that she's a black-haired girl named Marie. Klaus continues worrying to himself, thinking that if Marie's goal is revenge for the pavilion he destroyed, then he needs to be careful. Marie politely asks if Klaus called for her, standing properly like a servant. Klaus is startled by her sudden response, clearly caught off guard while he was deep in thought. From above, they're shown standing near the desk. Klaus thinks that she's been close by since earlier and wonder if it's just a coincidence. Klaus looks serious and tells Mary that he will personally teach her what she needs to do as his personal attendant, ordering her to follow him. Mary reacts in surprise, flustered but obedient, quickly answering that she understands. Klaus narrows his eyes and thinks confidently that with his sharp mind, he'll be able to uncover whatever hidden revenge plan Mary might be concealing. Meanwhile, Mary clenches her fists nervously, showing a mix of tension and determination as she prepares herself. In the kitchen, Klaus explains that the first thing Mary must learn as a personal attendant is cooking. He says she should at least be able to make basics like tea, or it'll be a problem. Mary nervously but earnestly says she'll try. Mary looks unsure and hesitates, clearly nervous as she prepares to start. Close-up of Mary's hand reaching for eggs, showing her carefully and awkwardly beginning the cooking task. Klaus watches her and thinks that she isn't used to this kind of work, likely because she's lived lazily until now. Klaus says he isn't interested in her cooking skill itself. His focus is on her attitude and reactions, not the result. Mary is chopping ingredients, but she's clearly tense and clumsy. Klaus explains in his thoughts why he even made her do this in the first place. The chopping gets rough and loud. Klaus thinks that because she's cooking for him, someone who has irritated her for a long time, it must be extremely stressful for her. He imagines soon Mary will not be able to hide her true nature and turn sharp and irritated. And her real self will definitely show. Suddenly, professional chefs step in and kindly teach Mary various cooking techniques. Klaus is surprised. This isn't what he expected to happen at all. Mary listens seriously and follows instructions. The chefs emphasize basics like controlling heat, and Mary responds earnestly. Klaus notices the atmosphere has completely changed. He realizes that in this situation, it's impossible to make Mary angry anymore. Mary nervously but proudly presents the finished dish to Klaus, saying it's ready. Her expression shows effort, sincerity, and a bit of anxiety. From above, we see the two of them at the table in an awkward silence. Klaus thinks the dish isn't exactly good, but thanks to the chef's help, it's still edible. He's nervous, but notes that at least it isn't bad enough to force Mary to eat it herself. In his thoughts, Klaus decides to pressure her through other kinds of work instead of cooking, while she nervously stands by. Klaus calmly says next and tells Mary to follow him. Mary helps with administrative work, reading, and organizing documents at a desk. She washes clothes outside, quietly doing laundry without complaint. Then Mary is cleaning Klaus's private room, carefully sweeping and tidying up the furniture. Klaus continues giving her more tasks, noting that the amount of work is far too much for just one maid. Despite the heavy workload, Mary doesn't get angry at all. She looks a bit tired but remains calm and obedient. Klaus watches from a distance and thinks that maybe it's unrealistic to provoke a reaction from her in just one day. Klaus looks serious and calls Mary's name, having decided to change his approach. He tells her that starting tomorrow, she'll keep doing the same kind of work every day. He's shifting to a long-term plan instead of forcing quick results. Klaus thinks to himself that this method will slowly wear her down and let stress build up naturally over time. She will definitely then show her true face. Meanwhile, Mary stands quietly, holding her cleaning tools. Mary says she's very grateful to be chosen as Klaus's personal maid, and smiles gently, and says she's genuinely happy. Despite her happiness, she admits she also feels anxious and unsure. She quietly wonders whether she can truly become a personal maid who can stand beside Klaus every day. Mary recalls her past. Before this, she wasn't even allowed into the kitchen. Everyone feared her because of her black hair. But the first job entrusted to her now is cooking, which still makes her nervous. Mary confesses she isn't good at cooking, but she's trying to push herself to meet Klaus's expectations. The dish is partly burnt, so the result isn't very good, but with the chef's help, Mary manages to finish the meal. Klaus eats the food quietly without saying anything and finishes it completely. Mary feels overwhelmingly happy. This was food that no one had ever wanted to touch before. After cooking, Mary continues with other tasks like washing clothes and cleaning Klaus's room, realizing she's being entrusted with truly private responsibilities. She's even trusted with more personal duties. Mary thinking that today's work was nothing special, and that even if she lost her position, it would be understandable. But Klaus calmly tells Mary that starting tomorrow, she should continue doing the same work as today, and asks if she understands. Mary hesitates at the door, softly calling Klaus, nervous about speaking up. Mary reflects that Klaus is trusting everything to her and allowing her to stay by his side from now on.
Overwhelmed with emotion, Mary lowers her head, blushing, wondering if it's really okay for her to feel this happy and valued. Mary smiles with determination, deciding to work as hard as she can and become a personal maid who truly meets Klaus's expectations. Meanwhile, Klaus also wonders whether Mary can endure it in the long run, suspecting her patience may eventually be tested. Klaus thinks to himself that starting tomorrow, he'll gradually increase her workload. Mary brings tea and food to Klaus, looking a bit nervous but earnest, saying this is for today. Klaus sits at his desk, watching quietly as he accepts what she brought. Klaus notices that the quality of the tea and food has improved, likely because Mary has been receiving guidance from the cooks since then. Mary smiles brightly, and Klaus admits to himself that he wants to properly appreciate her hard work, but he holds back. Klaus suspects that if Mary truly holds a grudge, she might someday try to poison him as her revenge. Klaus thinks that instead of exposing Mary immediately, training and testing her over the long term will be more useful, especially if he ever faces danger as the final boss. Every time Mary serves him something, Klaus remains cautious, while Mary continues to stand there sincerely, unaware of his suspicions. Because of that possibility, Klaus always casts resistance magic before eating or drinking anything. Klaus reflects that, at least in this regard, he should be grateful to Mary. After several days of testing himself, his body can now neutralize almost any poison. He even uses a poisonous plant to confirm it. Klaus sits back at his desk and decides it's time to focus on reviewing documents again. He looks closer at the document, reacting with mild surprise as he notices something unusual. While reading, one name catches his attention, making him pause. The document introduces Marquis Wyndham, a noble living in the capital who is trusted by the king and serves as one of his close aides. Because he lost one of his eyes, he usually wears an eye patch, which adds to his distinctive appearance. He is described as a supporting character from the game's world, someone who once asked the protagonist for help during the Phantom Hand incident. After that story arc, he never appeared again, making him a character with an unresolved and wasted fate. Despite that, he became extremely popular among hardcore fans. He realizes the invitation is for Marquis Wyndham's 10th anniversary celebration as head of the family, which makes it a formal and politically significant event. Klaus reads the invitation and thinks honestly that attending the event has no real benefit for him. Klaus thinks further. Even though he has no personal connection with Marquis Wyndham, attending might still be better, especially since the invitation comes from someone close to the final boss faction. Maintaining appearances and relationships matters. As Mary approaches, the focus shifts to her footsteps, signaling something about to happen. Mary suddenly trips and loses balance. Her eyes widen in panic as the teacup fly up into the air. She shouts in surprise. The tea set sails across Klaus's desk. Klaus reacts instantly, without panic. Then the cup falls cleanly onto the desk. Klaus smiles and thinks that this result is not bad at all, clearly amused and impressed rather than angry. Klaus realizes the poison didn't work, so Mary has changed her approach to using heat instead. Seeing this, he decides he now needs resistance to heat as well. Mary stands frozen in panic, clutching the pot. She's trembling and calls out to Klaus, terrified that she's made a serious mistake. She apologizes profusely, convinced she has failed in her duty. Mary bows deeply, overwhelmed with guilt. She believes this is an unforgivable error for a personal maid. Mary declares that she's ready to accept any punishment. Klaus casually replies that the saucer is damaged too, speaking calmly. Klaus suddenly sharpens his focus, realizing something important. His expression shifts as an idea clicks. He suddenly brightens and announces that he has a good idea, clearly excited by a new thought. Mary, misunderstanding, nervously agrees to accept whatever punishment Klaus decides, fully prepared to take responsibility. Klaus then quickly adds that this is not what he meant. Klaus holds the letter and points out the obvious stains on it. Mary reacts in shock as Klaus explains his intention. He should send the letter back to the Marquis exactly as it is, without cleaning it. Klaus explains his reasoning. If the dirty letter is sent back, rumors about his bad reputation will spread even further, reaching beyond this area to the capital. Sending it back like this would look like an open provocation to the nobility. Klaus laughs and praises Mary. He says her earlier mistake gave him the idea, forgives her for this time, and compliments her work. Mary, deeply moved, thinks that her master truly is the best. It's explained that Klaus really did send the stained letter back. The scene shows the letter being discussed in a formal noble setting. A nobleman sits with his arms crossed, silent and thoughtful. The caption identifies him as the king's right-hand man, Orth Wyndham. New information comes in. The kingdom's intelligence unit has reported signs of the Demon King's revival just a few days ago. If that happens, an invasion of the Solstia kingdom is likely. Orth looks troubled. The narration explains the problem. Rebellious factions are appearing across the country, and there are signs that a noble may be secretly working behind the scenes. However, their true identity is still unknown, and the kingdom cannot mobilize all its forces yet.
Orth Wyndham holds his head in frustration, shocked by the situation.
He explains that with the king's support, he planned to invite suspicious nobles under the pretense of a banquet to investigate them, but something has gone wrong.
He looks at the letter Klaus sent back. Seeing that it's stained and dirty, Orth is stunned.
He wonders what Viscount Lenford is thinking by replying to an official message in such a disrespectful way, simply returning the original letter without even rewriting it. Orth slumps back on the sofa, troubled. Despite Lenford's bad reputation, Orth never expected him to openly display hostility like this, making the situation far more serious than anticipated. A mustached man speaks calmly, explaining that Viscount Lenford only became the head of his family a few months ago. Their family reputation had already been poor since the previous generation.
The mustached man's eyes sharpen as suspicion grows. This response feels like a deliberate provocation rather than ignorance.
He stops Orth and asks him to wait a moment, sensing something important, and notices the stains on the letter and realizes the shape of the blotches looks intentional, as if they are trying to show or point to something, not just random dirt. Orth suddenly understands. He wonders if the stains resemble a map, specifically a territorial map.
An explanation follows.
The Margrave rules a vast territory bordering the underworld forest, which acts as a boundary between the human world and the demon world. Because of this location, the Margrave is rumored to have connections with demons and is considered one of the most dangerous nobles. Orth questions whether this could really be just a coincidence, showing his growing suspicion. The older man feels something is off and asks for a moment to think, sensing an inconsistency.
He reacts sharply, realizing there is something important hidden in the text.
The two men examine the letter more closely.
One of them suspects that the stained area might also be hiding a message.
Orth focuses on the letters that were stained.
Reading only the marked parts, a message appears.
Beware the subordinates of Phantom Hand. Orth and the older man react strongly to the decoded name Phantom Hand.
The name clearly means something serious to both of them.
Orth explains that Phantom Hand is a criminal syndicate whose name has been circulating in the capital lately. According to rumors, humans and demons are cooperating, plotting to overthrow the Solstia kingdom.
Orth turns thoughtful and tense.
He wonders what the sender Viscount Lenford was truly trying to warn him about regarding Phantom Hand.
Orth raises a key question. How could Lenford obtain such deep information?
He wonders if Lenford is cooperating with the Margrave or exchanging intelligence, but doubts the Margrave would leak secrets so carelessly. Orth thinks through the situation. He assumes Viscount Lenford gathered this information through his own intelligence network and was careful enough to send it as a coded message. They decide that regardless of whether the information is fully accurate, it's too dangerous to ignore. Orders are given to tighten surveillance on the Margrave's subordinates and inform the guard forces.
Orth shows a faint, serious smile.
If his deduction is correct, then Viscount Lenford isn't just a noble, he's a brilliant strategist whose actions could change the course of the nation's history. The narration explains that 1 month later, Klaus's prediction is proven correct. During the party, a subordinate disguised as a knight used a magic tool to launch a coordinated attack with monsters. A hooded man reveals himself and declares, "We are Phantom Hand." He orders an all-out assault and unleashes monsters using a magical device, commanding them to slaughter everyone.
Chaos erupts at the banquet.
A noble screams as an attack suddenly begins, catching everyone off guard. The attackers laughs wildly, but suddenly someone saying this is exactly the information they were given.
The attackers look shocked, realizing things have gone terribly wrong. A group of fully armed knights suddenly appears, weapons drawn. Their presence shows the area has been heavily secured. The Phantom Hand attacker is confused and panicking. He wonders why there are so many guards and knights here, realizing something is wrong.
Orth steps forward calmly and gives a clear order, "Crush them."
The attack is immediately suppressed with overwhelming force. The enemy screams in shock, realizing this outcome was not part of their plan. Thanks to thorough preparation, they completely suppress the attackers. The scene shows knights and survivors safe, with monsters defeated.
The hooded culprit is restrained and demanded to tell who is really behind everything, hinting at a larger mastermind. The captured Phantom Hand member looks terrified but still smirks, saying, "I'll tell you in the afterlife." Before they can extract more information, he suddenly self-destructs, preventing any interrogation. Orth reacts calmly but seriously, realizing they've won the battle but lost the chance to uncover the true mastermind.
Marquis then reflects that the incident wasn't ordered by him at all,
and it was likely the Phantom Hand acting on their own, using his subordinate as cover. Marquis suspected to be the mastermind, but avoided the death penalty by acting completely ignorant, as if he knows nothing. During sentencing, the nobles who cooperated with the Marquis are identified as part of the rebel faction.
This is a major win for the kingdom. Most importantly, the chaos is resolved without a single injury. The hall returns to calm, and nobles move around normally again, showing the crisis has ended. Then the narration hints that beyond the political outcome, something else has quietly changed. The narration explains that in the original game timeline, Marquis Wyndham and his servant were supposed to suffer greatly from this incident, Wyndham losing an eye and his loyal servant. But the situation has turned out differently this time. Orth then say he should thank Viscount Lenford properly. He acknowledges that Lenford's actions were crucial. In this timeline, Wyndham doesn't lose anything at all. The King of Solstia praises Orth, calling him noble and saying his handling of the recent attack was exceptional. The king is identified as Ander von Solstia. Orth responds respectfully, showing humility and loyalty toward the king. Orth then says there is something important he must discuss, specifically about the person who predicted the attack and provided Orth with information beforehand. Orth speaks calmly, describing the person in question as the bravest and most capable individual in the kingdom, and clearly identifies that person as an exceptional strategist, emphasizing intelligence over raw power. While all this praise spreads, Klaus himself is relaxed and laughing, contrasting sharply with how highly others now view him. Klaus's reputation continues to rise, and his name has now reached even the king's ears. Klaus subsequently thinks that 3 weeks have passed since he reincarnated, but his bad reputation still hasn't spread much among the general public. He considers his relationship with Maria and how he should respond to Marquis Wyndham, and reflects that things were going according to plan, but the ordinary people still don't know what he did behind the scenes in the mansion or territory. He then confidently decides on his next big plan to destroy the temple of the gods worshipped by the people, showing his dramatic and slightly over-the-top mindset. Klaus recalls discovering a luxurious temple in the capital after the dungeon incident, realizing it's dedicated to the region's guardian deity. He thinks, because of his high luck stat, whenever he did anything bad, it ends up being seen as good by others. Then he assumes that if he destroys the temple, the god's anger will definitely ruin his luck, and the people will eventually hate him, and ultimately destroying their trust in him. He gets excited, believing destroying the temple is a perfect idea, like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Subsequently, the butler and Mary approach Klaus. The butler calls out to him respectfully, "Master," while Mary follows behind carrying a tray. The butler then calmly asks Klaus where he intends to go, sensing he's about to head out somewhere. Klaus looks slightly annoyed, reacting with a small groan as he's interrupted. The butler then reminds him there's a meeting today about the drop in agricultural productivity, implying Klaus shouldn't skip it. Klaus says he has important matters to handle and plans to leave, thinking he should have escaped through the windows earlier. Upon hearing this, the butler asks to accompany Klaus himself, politely but firmly, and tells Maria to stay behind and prepare for the meeting. She agrees, though she looks a bit disappointed since she wanted to go with Klaus. Klaus agrees, thinking having a witness will actually help spread bad rumors about him faster once he destroys the temple. Meanwhile, Maria quietly accepts staying behind, even though she clearly wanted to follow Klaus. Klaus then arrives at the temple, which looks small but stands oddly in the middle of a barren, empty area. He notes how unnatural the place feels, like it doesn't match its surroundings. The butler then nervously asks what Klaus intends to do here. Klaus reaches his hand out toward the temple, focused and ready to act. The butler is shocked, realizing something feels off and sensing Klaus is about to do something extreme. Klaus unleashes a powerful spell, Prominence Burst, instantly blowing apart the temple with a massive explosion. While the butler behind him is shocked, realizing what Klaus just destroyed. The butler then starts to panic, saying this is impossible and say that such a reckless act could have serious consequences, and thinks that destroying this temple will definitely ruin the future of the Renford region. Klaus then thinks bringing the butler along was the right choice all along, since someone is there to witness his evil act. But, suddenly he noticed something, as the destroyed temple begins reacting strangely, and something starts to emerge from the ruins. And a divine being with wings appears, thanking Klaus for awakening it, revealing the temple wasn't just symbolic, but actually sealing something. Instead of angering the gods, Klaus accidentally awakens a divine entity, completely backfiring his plan in the opposite direction once again. The divine being addresses Klaus politely, calling him the man whose name I do not know. It says that as thanks for freeing him, it will reveal its name. The butler is shocked, while Klaus realizing there really was a god inside the temple, while staying calm. And before the divine entity revealed his name, Klaus used Inferno Flame on him. Klaus's fire attack hits directly, overwhelming the god. Its body starts burning uncontrollably. The god suddenly panics, confused by what's happening. Klaus calmly observes that a single attack isn't enough to defeat it, implying he's testing its limits. The god quickly backs down, screaming for him to stop and even offering to make a contract with him.
But Klaus unleashes Inferno Flame again, attacking more seriously this time.
The god is directly hit and screams in pain as the flames overwhelm it.
Klaus keeps firing repeated attacks without stopping, not giving the god any chance to recover. The god becomes completely confused and desperate, unable to understand how it's being overpowered, questioning what's happening and who Klaus really is. 10 minutes later the god is completely defeated, collapsed on the ground, unable to believe it lost despite being a high-level entity.
And the god's presence fades away.
Upon seeing this, Klaus casually says it's over and suggests going home, treating the whole fight like it was nothing. The butler, however, is in awe, realizing Klaus is overwhelmingly powerful rather than foolish. As Klaus sees this, he feels satisfied, thinking he has finally damaged his reputation and lost his subordinates' trust. He then bursts out laughing, clearly pleased with the outcome. A few hours later, the butler speaks seriously, admitting he misjudged Klaus.
He begins explaining the situation of the territory.
Reports show mana supply is uneven, causing both agriculture and fishing to decline across the region. The butler concludes that the worsening situation could lead to famine, and all of it was caused by that troublesome sealed entity. It's revealed that 30 years ago, previous rulers sealed an evil god inside the temple. Even though the region avoided total collapse, maintaining the seal required a huge amount of pure mana. Because so much mana was used to maintain the seal, crop yields dropped, creating the current crisis. But Klaus unknowingly solved a major hidden problem, because the sealed god was draining mana, causing the region's decline.
By destroying it, he actually helped the territory instead of ruining it.
Few hours earlier, the butler thinks there's nothing more they can do about the entity, and plans to inform Klaus about this in upcoming meeting. But Klaus casually says he has something important to do and will return before the meeting.
And the butler notices Klaus has been going out alone frequently.
The butler then reflects that at first he thought Klaus's actions should be stopped, but now things are different. He realizes Klaus's reputation keeps rising every time he acts, even after dealing with dangerous situations.
Still, the butler thinks Klaus might still have a selfish or unpredictable side.
So he decides to follow Klaus anyway, asking permission to accompany him. He realizes he completely underestimated how quickly Klaus has grown stronger. He reflects that Klaus defeated a monster that once required an entire army and past rulers just to seal.
The butler looks at Klaus with admiration, clearly impressed.
Seeing Klaus from behind, the butler feels the same pride and respect he once felt serving that great ruler. The butler compares Klaus to his grandfather, a wise ruler who deeply cared for the people and led from the front. Klaus is now fully recognized as a true leader figure. Even being compared to a respected past ruler, his image has only improved further.
The butler looks toward Klaus from behind, addressing Klaus's grandfather, clans, in his thoughts.
He confidently states that Klaus will grow into an extraordinary leader, someone who will surpass even his grandfather.
The scene then shows the aftermath of destruction, reinforcing how Klaus has already achieved something incredible.
Few days later, Klaus wonders, when will the effects of destroying the temple will show?
But suddenly he hears a knock.
Klaus then casually allows him to enter, already expecting something.
The butler then reports something to Klaus, saying there's important news. The butler explains that thanks to Klaus defeating the evil entity, mana is now flowing properly again across the entire territory.
And praises Klaus, calling him truly extraordinary.
Klaus's action didn't cause chaos, instead, it completely fixed the region's core problem, making things better than before. The butler then explains that crop and seafood production have increased dramatically.
He also adds that the food shortage problem across the entire region has now been completely solved thanks to him defeating the evil god. Klaus is confused and slightly panicked, asking what the butler means, and what evil god. Then the butler casually clarifies, of course it's the name of the entity you defeated few days ago. Klaus is shocked, finally realizing the truth, the being he defeated wasn't a guardian god, but actually an evil god. News of Klaus's achievement spreads quickly across the entire region. Because of the huge harvest, the people are sending thanks and food in large amounts. Upon hearing this, Klaus quietly breaks down inside, unable to accept it, realizing everything he did only made his reputation even better again. The scene then shifts to a chef introduces himself politely. Meanwhile, Klaus is still in shock, thinking this isn't the time for casual greetings. The chef then drags Klaus, and excitedly explains that a huge amount of fresh ingredients has arrived from all over the region. And because of that, we immediately cooked it into the special dishes of your likings. The chef then happily tells him to enjoy the meal. Afterward, Klaus takes a bite, still mentally shaken. Upon biting, Klaus freezes for a moment, then realizes something surprising. This food is extremely delicious, far beyond anything he's ever eaten, with incredible freshness and rich flavor. Even the food, made from the good outcome of his actions, is amazing, making Klaus feel even worse since everything keeps turning out perfectly instead of badly. Even while complaining, he admits the food is still really delicious. Klaus, now full, starts thinking clearly again and feels frustrated. His plan completely failed. He reflects that he tried to kill the guardian god to lower his luck and ruin his reputation, but everything turned out the opposite.
Klaus internally screams in despair, wondering why everything keeps going wrong.
Outside, people misunderstand his tears. They think he's so moved by the food that he's crying, and they even prepare more dishes. Even though his plan failed, he still didn't give up, as he published a notice. Soldiers are gathered, and the knights are confused, wondering what this new announcement means.
The official order says all knights must take a mandatory 1-month break, and are forbidden from training or fighting.
The order is signed by Klaus, leaving everyone puzzled about his intentions.